Um, it's worth noting also that I added some additional collision detection settings here in common. So originally we had the player, we had one called enemy, another one called, I believe, arrow. I have created more of these to have a more refined collision detection setting. And so the way that works is the player can collide with the zombie type object, the skeleton type object, the skeleton arrow, a chest, or a gem. A zombie can collide with the player, player arrow, skeleton arrow, and traps. And then the skeletons can hit the player arrow, and the traps, but they can't be hit by skeleton arrows. Skeleton arrows will pass right through them and not kill other archers. So archers can kill zombies, but not archers, and they can also kill players. Whereas the player arrow can kill zombies and skeletons. So this is how we get a very quick. It's worth noting, and I think I said this before, that doing this by hand is a kind of a painful process. You'd have to set up a number of these values, do the math, hopefully you didn't make a mistake. If you did like I did, you'd come along later and go, oh yeah, I really need a chest type, or I need to add some traps, or I want to add an arrow that only does certain kinds of collisions. And this is the point where you got it all set up the first time. It's all working. And then you come along later and you go, oh, I need more. And that's when you make the mistake. This is why I made the Collision Manager plugin. Because as you can see, it was quite simple for me simply to add more names representing a collision type, that is the body type that I wanted, and then to set up the rules. To say, oh, the skeleton collides with these things, the player collides with these things, done. I don't have to do the math. All I have to do later is call the Collision Manager and say, give me the right numbers to plug into the engine. And so on that note, I add a body to the chest object. I make it dynamic. I give it a radius of 10, just sort of randomly selected, big enough so that it overlaps the visual part that we're going to see. The density doesn't really matter. In fact, I could just take this bit out here because it's not going to be moving. Let's see, what else? Or I could have made this static because I'm not going to allow it to move, but let's just leave it alone. And then here's the key part, filter. I say, I want to set the filter. This is the part where we used to have to do math. Instead, I say, collision calculator, just give me the filter for the object type chest. It does a little lookup in a previously calculated value and gives me a table containing two numeric values that get put into the filter. Easy peasy. The only other thing I do here is I mark the chest with a field called collider name, and I make that collider name chest. Now the reason I'm doing this is it's a flag so that later when a collision occurs, I can look at the object and go, what are you? And because I've marked the collider name field chest, I can say, ah, it's a chest. So I need to do something special because it's a chest. Or I need to do something special because it's a skeleton arrow, or whatever the case might be. The rules of my game, the way my code is written, would control what I need to do with that. So this is just an indicator, a flag that I can use later. I may never use it. It depends. But having it, at least I have a way of detecting this and saying, ah, this is a chest. Let's see. The only other thing was chest to back. We don't need that code anymore. That's old because I'm now using the item system. Previously, I was putting these into the content layer, and I wanted to make sure that these were always below the player, because the player was created previously. So I pushed them to the back, but I'm not doing that now, so I took out that push to back. The only other thing I really have to do here is I'm going to skip, I guess I won't. I have to choose, based on the color that I've previously selected, what this chest is supposed to represent when the player walks over it. So blue chests give us one mousetrap. White chests give us the leaf storm, and the red chests give us the spike trap. So what I do is I mark a field on the chest called my pickup. Again, I'll use it later in the code, but at the time that I do the collision detection for this chest, I will say, what's your pickup? Oh, mousetrap. All right. Increment the mousetrap HUD by 1. Give the player one more mousetrap in their inventory. Move on. What else do we need here? Let me see. Yeah, okay, so this is the collision handler for the chest. And as I was saying here, so what it does is it says, first of all, let's get the other, the object that is colliding with the chest. So self is the chest. Other is the object that is colliding with it. Get the collider name. I set this field up for all my different objects. And it says basically, if the collider is not the player, then return false. Now I want to point out at this point, this code is completely unnecessary. You know why? I put it in here because people do collision code differently from me, and this is a good way to refine your collision code. If you only want one kind of object to be detected, you could do it this way. However, if we take a close look at our code here, you're going to see that the chest can only be collided with by one object type. Only the player will ever collide with the chest. Zombies and skeletons do not. Arrows do not. Other chests and gems do not. And because of that, this collision code will only ever fire if a player collides with the chest. No other object type will trigger the collision detection code in the first place. So this is sort of like redundant. This would function just as well without this line. Again, I put it in here because other people may find themselves needing to refine their collision handlers to do one thing if it's a player, to do another thing if it's an enemy, etc., etc. And simply by marking objects as their type when you create them, then you can look at the other collider name or whatever you want to call your flag value and say, ah, it's a player. Oh, it's a enemy. It's a bullet. And do something different based on that. All right, what else do we do here? The very first thing I do is, because I'm not looking at the phases, as soon as a collision occurs, it's probably going to be a began phase. In fact, it should always be the began phase. But I don't care. The very first time I get a collision event, I'm going to remove the event listener and stop listening for events, because that's it, I'm done. I'm going to pick this chest up. It's going to go away. Very next, I remove the chest. However, actually for better coding style, I probably should put this later. It doesn't make any difference. It's an interesting note that although I've said display remove, at this point all the fields on self are still there. It's not until the next cycle that that object will get cleaned up anyways. So having it here versus having it here makes no code difference to any field, any custom fields I sent. However, I think it's probably better to delete it at the very end after I'm done operating on it. So, check the pickup type. If it's a mousetrap, increment the common traps counter for mousetraps, which is where I keep my counters. I keep those in the common. I keep those in common so that everybody can see them. And when I say everybody, the player, the HUDs, the other traps, etc. It's just a nice, easy way to centralize my data storage. And let's see, where's counter? Searching. All right. Trap counts. All right, so I got a field here called trap counts, and I got one for mousetrap, one for storm, and one for spike trap. So if the chest is for mousetrap, I increment the counter by 1. Same for leaf storm, same for spike trap. And the only other thing I do is I post an event. I dispatch an event using my own custom dispatch code, which I've shown before, called onSFX. The sound code is listening for that, and it will receive it. It will parse out the SFX name and just play a random noise that I selected. These are not great noises, and people who want to elaborate on this code later should definitely replace these noises, but I had to have something as a placeholder. So coin 1 from some other collection of sounds I made sometime in the past, coin 2 and coin 3. That way, when you're playing the game, you don't necessarily have to see. When you're playing this game and it starts to get fast and furious, if you have a distinctive sound for the different chests and therefore the traps that you pick up, you won't have to be looking at your trap counters all the time to know what you've got. You'd be like, I need another leaf storm. Bong. Well, I know that sound means I just picked up a leaf storm. I can use it instead of having to look away from what's going on the screen to your HUD.